one of the things that, well, there's two things, but one thing is about validation. What do you think about validation through social media? When you're saying something and someone comments back about your work, or you're commenting about something else, how important is that? I mean, in terms of like the brand, or in terms of what the business is trying to do, is validation a big key? Because people seem to, at least on Facebook, people love to have like, and this gives something there. Is that something that you shoot for? Is that something you count on, or you're just saying it?
Honestly, I mean, like they say, even bad press is still good press. I mean, like, honestly, like there's nothing irritates me more than when a business or organization will delete a comment I had, even if it's the most scathing, most insulting thing I've ever said, which actually doesn't happen too often because I try to play fair. But there are people on the internet who definitely don't play fair. They will say the most terrible thing you've ever read. But the important part is to act appropriately, take it offline if you need to, or email them. Address a consumer's concern. You may come to you may come to the conclusion that they're just absolutely insane. But I think, every so often, depending on how often this sort of thing happens, it's important to pay attention to this sort of things. Did Gap out, reach out to every designer or every person who tried to act like a designer and say like, what, you don't like our logo? Why? No, they're just like, well, wow, this is overwhelmingly negative. They're just kind of taking the temperature overall and taking a sampling or an average or a median of the kind of response they'd gotten and the kind of press they'd gotten. And press still isn't irrelevant, it just takes different forms now. One thing, so Gap didn't reach out to everyone who had a negative comment. That would have been impossible. They probably would be 2% in right now.
Right.
But they made a decision, and even people weren't satisfied with that. You're not going to be able to please everybody in any given situation. But I think it's appropriate, depending on the concentration and the level and the amount and the frequency, to pay attention to certain things. If a person took the time out to post a comment on your blog, why not take the same nanosecond to make a reply? If they're genuinely, then it just ends up floating over to customer service. And there's companies out there, similar to Ford, but in a different way. Ford, I think, just really came up with a really cool, experimental, maybe risky, social media campaign to help market a product. There are companies out there like Comcast and Zappos, which are doing exceptional things on the level of customer service in real time, mainly through Twitter. So,
well, to that point, I don't know if everybody heard what happened today, but Wes had found something from a magazine called Cook Source magazine, and it was a copyright issue. Mm-hmm. And you were hearing about it too. But
yes.
Essentially what happened was a woman wrote in her blog, I guess an article. It was lifted from her blog, put onto this other website. It was altered a little bit, and it was put up there as their own work.
As their own work.
As their own work. As Cook magazine's own work. What ended up happening was the woman found out about it, went to them appropriately.
Like a recipe or something?
Yeah. I think
Yes,
it was a recipe.
It was an article that she wrote 5 years ago about apple pies. And they took her article and edited it, and they put it online, and also it's a print magazine that's been around.
So what ended up happening, the phenomenon that happened today, and actually started about 10:30 today, was she went to the magazine, to the publisher, editor-in-chief, asked, saying, look, you took it, I know you took it, you know you took it, pay me $130, or pay it to the institution of my choice, give me an apology on Facebook, and send me an email, an apology. Well, she got a response back, and I would encourage you to go into the CoinLoft website, but I'm sure right now it's being picked up everywhere. But to make a long story short, they had to shut down their website within 2 hours. Facebook had, within 2.5 hours, how many, Wes?
We found out about it through someone else here at around 2 and some change. There were about 400 people on Facebook they started out with 110 friends on Facebook and I guess around 10:30 or so the traffic really started. You can actually see it on Google where the traffic really spiked in terms of their involvement in this whole thing. But essentially, there were about 400 people at 2 o'clock. And an hour later, when I really started following it, there were 128 people more. And 2 hours later, there were 1,300 people more, all bashing the brand.
Right.
And essentially, a 13-year-old magazine was done in about 4 or 5 hours.
Right.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, and by that point, Twitter, and I don't know what the ratio is between when they call it a national trend and just a regional trend. How many tweets an hour? Do you know that? Do you know? But I think it's like something like 10,000, maybe 10 million tweets an hour, or whatever it is. And all of a sudden it becomes a national trend and it goes on to their thing. So all of a sudden we were like looking at it. It was like the stock market. We saw it like actually building up. But the reason why I'm bringing it up, and it's a point that you're just making now, is that some of the comments that we're reading and so what was going there was almost like techno, gang, getting them to whatever. It was really painful in a lot of respects. And what's your take on that? I mean, what do you think about things like that that happen? Because you've seen that phenomenon happen often.
All the time.
All the time, right. And it ends up being, and what can a company do if, when they're doing that and they're trying to get to market their product, and all of a sudden, in this case, she was rather arrogant and snarky about her response, and she got nailed on Facebook. But what do you think about that?
I mean, first of all, upon reading that, for some reason just side with the original author. For some reason, I just feel compelled that CookSource probably did steal their stuff. I mean, what reason did this person have to stir up nonsense or blatantly lie or make up a story? So, based on that, if I were CookSource, I'd address this issue. I mean, let's backtrack to, a year or two? I'm not even sure how long ago. Domino's.
No.
All it took was just some jerk in a store to, put there's boogers on a pizza, and that was pretty bad. Domino's is still around. I think they actually responded appropriately. Within 24 hours or within that week, we had a video from the CEO who addressed the situation at hand. They've definitely been doing other things to really recover from whatever damage they've incurred from that. They came out with a new recipe, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're just trying to kind of sweep it away under the rug. That's the thing with the internet. These opinions will come out of nowhere like a torrential downpour. But the internet's also got a really short attention span, to be honest with you. This stuff is not published on paper. It's, buried in one of the bajillion links that are on the internet. People will eventually forget about it. Unless, I'm Googling internet memes from 12 years ago, like I was the other night. But I'm not everyone, so.
Do you think a brand of their caliber, because they're pretty regional for where they are. They're not like a large. Yeah, from what I understand, they're not a large publication. If anybody here had 1,500 people show up, 1,800 people show up at their front door saying we don't like you, how do you recover from something like that without having, the money to do so?
If the alleged claims are legitimate and it's literally what they're doing, I would address this problem head on. I would make a comment on it. You really need to validate yourself. You need to explain how and why. And CookSource, the response they had given was kind of doing that, but in the snarkiest, most condescending way possible. They essentially told the author that, well, your article was in desperate need of edits, so you should really owe us money. No. That's because, yeah, that's what they said.
She actually